So hi everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I've got Sam here today with us. Sam, I just worked out today that Sam and I were both born in Hong Kong and that we both moved to Australia when we were 6. But Sam, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, so I'm Sam. Yes, I'm born in Hong Kong, and I came here when I was 6, and I've been living here for the past 20 odd years. And yeah, I think I met you, Kit, when we both were students at Sydney Missionary and Bible College.
Yeah.
Um, and so during the week, I do a lot of things. I've got too many fingers and too many pies. But during the week, I work for a ministry organization called Living Faith that provides pastoral support for Christians who experience attraction to the same sex and also gender incongruence. I also work one day a week as on staff for Springwood Presbyterian Church up in the Blue Mountains. And I'm the chairman of Onward, a KCC conference convention that engages young people to think critically about their culture and how to think Christianly about the way they live. So those are a couple of things that I do.
And recently you've written some journal articles that I've read, like about disability and just thinking about a range of things.
Yeah, that's right. So recently, I've recently been published by the Australian Journal of Jewish Studies on my research on the Book of Esther and the Festival of Purim and its relevance in terms of thinking about living in suffering and how faith works in suffering. So that was my latest publication. I've done a review of one of Sam Aubrey's book in Familios. I've done a few conference papers on disability in the space of youth, in the space of accommodation and inclusion. And I'm currently in the works of writing a particular book with a couple of people about disability inclusion as well.
Yeah, I would love to just ask you a little bit more about the disability work that you're doing, because I think it's something that many of us haven't thought about as Christians, I guess, like thinking about. So what is it that you're doing? And I guess just help us to kind of understand, I guess, this space.
Yeah, maybe it'll be helpful to talk about the different roles I have in thinking about disability from official to unofficial.
Yep.
So officially, I'm on 2 committees. Pardon me. I'm on 2 committees for disability ministry in Australia. One of them is called Jesus Club, which I love. And Jesus Club is we are an organization that equips and empowers churches to produce ministry, a specific ministry for adults with intellectual disabilities. And we support them by producing materials and a network and training and all that kind of stuff. And I think that really came about because I think in all areas of society, and not only in churches, people who have particularly an intellectual disability are often marginalized. I often tell the story of how I went to a church once and there was a particular girl with cerebral palsy and autism as well, and she was nonverbal, and she was looked after by a foster parents, and every morning service she'll get wheeled into church, and she'll sit next to her parents, but whenever it's morning tea, it really saddened me that she was just there. at the seats, when everyone was at the back of the hall eating morning tea, she was just by herself and playing with the toys that she had. Now, in a way, we can't blame people for perhaps not approaching her if after the first approach she doesn't respond to them. And I think there is that reciprocality, I think, that we humans like, and perhaps we read into other people's the social cues of other people that they might not talk to us. For this particular lady, she's been left alone there, and it really broke my heart when I saw that, because I really thought this I don't think she wants to be alone. In my interactions with her, she has a life and a deep relationality that perhaps we can't see. And so often, whenever I do see her, I don't see her now. So she's not in foster care anymore. I would ask her questions, and I'll wait, and she won't respond. But I will, if she lets me, I'll hold her hand, or I'll play with the same toy that she's playing with, because I think there's a deep need of humanity and respect there. I don't know where I'm going with this. Oh, right, that's right. Jesus Club, right, Kit? Yeah. So Jesus Club is a space in churches where relationships and the faith and the spirituality of Christians with an intellectual disability can grow and form communities.
So do churches approach like the Jesus Club and say, we want to be a church that, I guess, welcome people with disability, or how does that like partnership work? Do they just, maybe I'll just stop there.
Yeah. I think either or. So I don't, because I'm on the committee, I work less on the ground. We make more of the executive decisions of the direction of the club. But at times we do have churches approaching and saying, hey, we've got a few members who have intellectual disability and we really want to investigate what it means to disciple them well, which is great. But a lot of the times it is actually us reaching out to churches and saying that we do exist. Because if you have a look around, right, if you have a look around evangelical churches in and around Sydney, Australia and beyond, you will... in a capital city, you will probably only find a handful of churches who have Christians with intellectual disabilities within them. And I say that it's very sad. It is incredibly sad. I think it can come from I think it comes from two things. Sometimes it comes from the assumption of Christians and churches, whether it's a cognitive, like whether it's an assumption that you have right in the front of your mind, or whether it's kind of at the back of your mind, that people with intellectual disability, those who can't communicate verbally, are less than human. We've had a range of language to describe them in the past that veering more towards a subhuman description, because of their lack of ability to communicate like the rest of society, which is, I think, as a Christian, that is incredibly false. We believe that God knits every person in the womb, no matter what, whoever they are, and that whether or not they have a disability or not, they are made with the image of God and deserves and demands respect and dignity. The other thing is, I think we actually don't think about, because it's kind of like um, it's kind of like a culture. We don't we sorry we let me give you an example, right?
Yep.
Like you've heard of culture clash, and I think a lot of people in the audience might have heard of culture clash, where you coming from a particular culture, say here in Australia, and going to somewhere like Japan or Southeast Asia or Africa, and you are suddenly thrown into a completely different culture, and you have to slightly learn your way through it. But then the strange thing is when you come back to your culture, there's something like reverse culture shock,
Yeah.
which is going, wow, all these things that I've experienced in that country has made me actually start thinking about all these things that are assumed in our country. The fact that we have uh, petrol to run our cars, the fact we have smartphones and Wi-Fi and 4G, a million other things, the fact we even have money, and the fact we have Medicare is a huge privilege that we just assume. And so I think for a lot of churches, the assumption of intellect and rationalism is held very high and never questioned. And so we create services and outreach and discussions and small group and fellowship that is based on a very cognitive aspect of faith.
Mm.
And in doing so, we're actually unknowingly or knowingly actively putting up walls for people who relate and think and engage with spirituality in a completely different way. For example, I'll give you an example. It's if we're looking at a disability example, it is like saying it is forgetting that there are people in our world who uses wheelchairs.
Mm.
And effectively, every church has placed their place of worship or whatever, and their outreach and their small group on a hill. On all four sides are stairs. So there are no way that anyone with a wheelchair would be able to get in.
Yeah.
Who uses a wheelchair would be able to get in. We've done the same thing by conducting our services and our ministries and our outreach within just a what people in the disability world call neurotypical perspective. We have actually marginalized a complete range of people in our care, and that's actually not the onus of those with a disability. That's the onus on us.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like all that you've just shared just right now, it's made me like think about how I like before going to SMBC and going to Bible college, I was totally, I feel like I was ignorant. I didn't even think about people with intellectual disability or other, like, I just felt like, I don't know why I was so careless and I didn't even think what the other person needs and how I can be, yeah, helping the other. So I think what you've just brought up just reminded me of all of that and how we need to, yeah, just be creative and just thinking and putting ourselves in someone else's shoes.
Yeah, and um, it's in a way missiology 101, isn't it? It is, but because we in the majority are neurotypical, we never think about missiology for people who have intellectual disabilities. We have had cultures and theologies in the past that have, created them as less and subhuman, or sometimes we have over spiritualized them and said they don't need the gospel because they don't need morality. They are closer to Jesus than we are. So we don't need to care for them. And so we've in a way, I don't exactly know who wrote this, but John Swinton quoted this. I think it's from a PhD dissertation, that we who are neurotypical are actually disabled to communicate and to explore ways of relationship that those who are non-neurotypical
Mm.
are. And he continues to write, sorry, I think it's a lady. This lady continues to write that those who can see would never understand what it means to see God if you've grown up for your whole life as blind. Those who are hearing will never know what it means to hear God's voice and God's word for those who have grown up with hearing impairments. Those who are neurotypical will never know what it means to love and relate to God as someone who has, say, is on the autism spectrum disorder, or and so those of us who can only conceptualize faith as a rational thing will never truly understand what it means to believe in God when rationality is beyond our grasp.
Mm. Yeah. So, if we, I guess, now that we've become aware that we need to kind of put ourselves in someone else's shoe, is there ways which you would recommend to help us to kind of like broaden our understanding or our horizon?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think the best way is actually exposure. And an exposure with a humble heart, not going into places and saying, what can I teach them? But how can I learn from them? And this is actually one of the scariest things. Perhaps I've grown accustomed to interacting with people with intellectual disabilities and people who are elderly. But there are still times where when I meet someone, there is a knee-jerk reaction inside of me that says, oh, this is not a from my perspective, from my tainted perspective, this is not a beautiful person. This is not a nice person. This person doesn't smell nice. The person is a bit unkempt. And immediately I have a reaction that I should not spend, like I should just be polite and I won't go deeper with this particular person. Yeah. It raises a dislike. One of a man who recently passed away, Jean Vanier, who started up the L'Arche movement, and now has since passed away, and also have had quite allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior come up, which has really tainted his who he is, and a lot of people felt betrayed. But one of the things he did write, and which I am very grateful for, is that he says that whenever we meet someone with a disability, someone who is vulnerable, someone who's different, we begin to other them because they actually reveal to us the vulnerability within us, behind the masks that we share, that we put on. Because of their vulnerability and their different and their brokenness, they actually stir within us emotions of our own brokenness. And so in reality, we just don't want to face brokenness. And I think there is fairness. I think everyone has to work through brokenness. Everyone has to work through their own brokenness and their own shame and their own feelings about themselves. But if our interactions with others are driven by that, then we're actually not seeing the person there. We're actually just seeing the mirror image of ourselves and hating ourselves. And so really, a lot of people are also very unsure about what to do when meeting someone with an intellectual disability. Um, and so I think, so back to addressing those things and go, hey, I'm going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm going to not know what to do. But those shouldn't be the things that stop me here. I'm always compelled, I think. I always go back to Matthew 25 or Matthew 26, because this is not my study. I don't know where the Bible is, but there's an NASB here, so I'll just flip it out.
Okay.
This drives my thinking about disability ministry. He's going to say to the sheep, you're blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the earth. For I, Jesus, was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in, naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous, the sheep, Christians, followers of Jesus, will say to Jesus, Lord, when did we see you hungry or feed you, or thirsty and give you something to eat or to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? The king will answer and say to them, truly I say to you, to the extent that you did it to one of these brothers of mine, even to the least of them, you did it to me.
Yeah.
And he subsequently says to the goats, you didn't do any of these things. And the goats say, when did we not do it? And Jesus says, when you didn't care for those who were the least of my brothers.
Yeah.
That drives me, because I realize that is a true calling of the Christian. Jesus is going to come back and go, you saw that beggar on the street. You had that 2 minutes of hesitation about whether or not to give the $2. And you think you probably shouldn't, because that beggar might go and collect those $2 and buy alcohol. You don't have time to invite them for a meal. So you say in your head, or I do at least, I won't give any money. That's rational, right? But I don't think that's biblical.
Yeah.
I think we are meant to give to the lowly. In that short space of time where we cannot rationalize and understand the situation, I think we are called to give. Because we don't know what that gift would do.
Yeah.
And it's the same, I think, in these situations. We forfeit the chance of serving Jesus when we forfeit the chance of having people who are lowly and have a disability within our care.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really challenged and encouraged to do something. And I feel like even the way you shared it, like just what you're sharing, you're not saying that you've got it all together, but I feel like it's, yeah, like what you're sharing about your hesitation is what I would feel as well. Like I feel like there is truth in that, but want to recognize that and then act as well.
Yeah, it's to push through the discomfort. It's to push through the unknown. It's to know that you are going to make mistakes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't even have to. This is not even a lesson in disability care. It's about life, isn't it? It's about thinking. It's having that posture of you're going to have to do something. You can't, world's broken. You can't just sit there on your thumb, twiddling your thumbs and saying that, oh yeah, by bringing in this tiny recycling isn't going to save the world. No, that's saving the world is none of your concern at this current moment. push through the discomfort,
Yeah.
and do what Jesus would do in that very moment.
Yeah.
And I think that would be my advice. Like, just do it. And in my interactions with people with a disability, if they don't like you, they're going to say it.
Yeah.
Not because of a particular thing, not because you've hurt them, but because they don't like you. But if they do like you, they'll say it as well. They will be honest to you.
Yeah.
And if wouldn't that be great if we could just say, I don't like you and I don't want to talk to you? No. But it's just a matter of pushing through, throwing yourself, go, there's 15 Jesus clubs around. Talk to that lady in the wheelchair, smile at the people in the street. Yeah.
So I'll put the link to the Jesus Club in the description box so that people who are interested, they can
definitely
read more and think more. I think at the beginning you said that there was two things that you do in particular with disability. Like I think you said Jesus was one of them, but we haven't got to the other. What was the other thing that you're?
So the other one, I'm part of OPCC, which is Our Place Christian Communities. And it's founded by both our lecturers, Kirk Paxton, and the dream of Our Place Christian Community is to help equip churches and Christian communities and families to establish homes where people with a disability and people without a disability live in a community, not as a carer and a cared, but as friends, because that's important. I was chatting with one of my friends, and one of my friends who are parents of a kid with disability, young adult with disability, and she said to me, it really does break my heart that all of this person's friends are paid friends.
Okay.
No one aside from paid people contact him. Oh, not no one, but hardly anyone do.
Yeah.
And the person probably doesn't feel that bad, but for them, that's so incredibly sad. Why doesn't the Christian community do that? It's our fear of, again, all those fears come up, how is this relationship going to be reciprocal? I presented at a conference a while ago, and I started the piece of paper thinking about reciprocality and friendship. And I was reading through Aristotle and his theory of friendship and reciprocality. And he says, I think, if I'm paraphrasing him correctly, that all friendships have to be reciprocal in nature. And my gut said, no, that's incorrect. I don't think it is reciprocal in nature between me and a person with a disability. But then the more I investigated that in research, in my exploring my own experience, I realized actually Aristotle is right. There is a reciprocality, but not in the reciprocality that I expect. They are in my friendship with those with a disability, they reciprocate perhaps not in neurotypical ways, but in non-neurotypical ways. And I have a disability to view that. They have a disability to see my neurotypical ways of relationship. And so true reciprocality occurs, if we're even talking about the ethics of interpersonal relationship, is actually sitting in the other person's shoes and trying to understand them. Taking that simple idea of reciprocality and the other and applying it to the big gulf of neurotypical, non-neurotypical people and going, yeah, there is. this person is a gift to me. Their repeated questions, for example, I call my grandma every week. She's in Hong Kong at the moment and she has dementia. And it is listening to a probably a 30-second loop. She'll ask me, "Oh, how are you going? How's your week been? What do you have for dinner? Have you had dinner yet? What do you have for dinner? Have you seen your mum? Have you had dinner yet? What did you have for dinner? Oh, great. Have you been back to your mum's place? How's mum and dad going? Yeah, have you had dinner yet? Are you hungry?" It's the same questions. And you could say, all right, you know what? This is a waste of time. We're going through the same thing over and over again. But when we sit in her perspective, she's not wasting my time because she's coming into each moment afresh. And she wants to know about how I'm going at every single moment.
Yeah.
That's why she's asking these questions. And it's because she has lost parts of her memory. But it's actually a posture of love. I forget why I raised that example. I think it's because it's going, I have to relate differently to different people. And that's not a bad thing. It's it's an uncomfortable thing. It's not a bad thing. And it's a beautiful, I think, a life-giving thing as well, as you start to get challenged and be loved just for who you are, you know, not for what you can do.
Yeah, I feel like my brain is a bit exploded with so many different thoughts and but even just like that last point you made about, you know, it's not about what we can do for the other person. It's not about how we function, but that we are just loved just by, you know, who we are, and how that's just an expression of God's love for us. Like Jesus just loves us, not because we couldn't do anything, but it's just who we are. And we can reciprocate that. We can model him by our relationship with one another.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so that's what OPCC does. It's a pretty new organization, but we really are seeking to create these communities and homes grouped not only around individuals and families, but around churches and communities. Because I think the other need is that there are so many people with there are so many people with disability out there in our world where parents are getting old.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a housing for them. And yeah, sometimes group housing is fantastic and it clicks. Other times it might not work. And on the back of all these parents' minds are, who's going to look after my child?
Yeah.
You know, who is going to look after my child when I'm gone? Are they nowadays we don't have asylums anymore, but are they just going to get, you know, thrown into a room and just get 3 meals a day and just have the bare minimum? Or are they actually going to thrive and be loved and love and live their full potential? Live God's full potential for them.
Yeah. How many homes have been set up? Because I know there's one, but is there been more than one home set up?
No, so that's kind of our pilot project. One in Springwood. We don't actually set up the homes. OPCC equips churches to think about disability inclusion and home setting up, but we've got other entities that does that. We're thinking about one in Springwood at the moment. We have been talking to other parents around Sydney who have similar ideas of wanting their kids to be in a Christian community and be brought up in a Christian community. I've got a great friend who they're part of Emmett House down in Stratfield. A good friend who's also a board member with me on Jesus Club, and her child is in that space where there's two men there, three men now actually, young men, all have either autism or an intellectual disability, and it's a bit more of a carer based space, but it is built upon Christian values. And I was at the launch of that house, and it was just such a life-giving and a beacon of hope in our overly dog-eat-dog world, where we're thinking about climbing on top of people and climbing up the ladder and thinking about how can we shine the best. It's a beacon of hope, I think. These communities and these homes, and I think in actual fact, the church ought to be of hope, where the lowly have very important space, and that those who are gifted are there to serve those who need help and need friendship, and we've got the capacity to as well.
Yeah, I feel like there's churches have been doing things to help with like food insecurity, which is really great. I've seen churches help with like refugee ministries, which is really great. But I think you've kind of given us helping us to see there's another need that we could also be involved with and participate. And there's so many good things that we could do, and you've given us so many suggestions already, which is really great.
Yeah. And I don't, as much as I think, I like to say it is a ministry, but I also push back and say it's not an extra ministry per se, because it is about the whole people of God.
Yeah.
People with intellectual disabilities aren't a special group of people. They are our brothers and sisters. They have equal places on our table. And we have to stop putting up barriers for them to get there. I think back in the olden days, but when you came to receive the Lord's Supper, you would come up, and there's actually a gate for some churches, and the gate, would be kept. And for those who can't partake, you would block them, or I can't remember the term. In effect, we have sometimes done that. Blocked people from coming to the Lord Jesus, knowingly or unknowingly, and that is very, very sad.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thanks for pushing back, because I don't want to kind of say that there is us and them, because there is no like us and them. We're one humanity.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think it's helpful to kind of like just clarify that.
Exactly. And it's 1 Corinthians 12 when Paul writes, the weaker parts of the body are served by the stronger parts, and it's not one part of the body is better than the other, but it's the whole body, so that all grow. And if we actually read that correctly, then if we don't have people with a disability within our churches when we should, then we are actually shooting ourselves in a body part, because they are not able, they are not given the chance to exercise the gifts that God has given them in our church. And perhaps one of the things is actually to critique our hypercognitive church that sees faith as knowing a set of doctrine, as opposed to faith in experience the Lord Jesus Christ. In years.
I want to just wrap this up. I was wondering whether there's anything, last words that you want to say to us, maybe something that you want us to take away from, listening to, this interview, If there's something that, I mean, it could be the same point, or it could be a new point, but I think, is there something that you want us to kind of walk away with?
Um, I think underlying, perhaps, yeah, I could say the underlying narrative of many of the ministries that I'm a part of and the areas of interest that I'm a part of is actually on about changing the posture of Christians.
Mm-hmm.
From a posture of kind of, because we have the truth, let's pick up our swords and fight. Because we have our truth, we've got the truth, everyone is wrong, so we don't have to listen to them.
Yeah.
A lot of my ministries and the things that I do and I'm passionate about is getting people to have that posture. Means that you are highlighting particular doctrines as greater doctrines and lowering other doctrines as invisible. I was chatting with someone after preaching at church this Sunday, and I said, sometimes we can really hold up the doctrine of scripture and truth and say, we've got that. We've got the knowledge of the universe. God's on our side. We've got the truth. So we can beat down liars with that. But in doing so, we speak in a way that undermines the doctrine of common grace and the doctrine of the image of God. We demonize people, perhaps in caricatures or rhetoric, and we justify our rhetoric because we think, because we say we're saying the right thing and truth hurts. But in actual fact, we've just discarded a key part of the whole counsel of God, we might put it. God's going to say one day, how did you use the gifts that I give you? How did you exercise the power that you had? Did you know the effects of your words? And I think I really want to, I think the last thing is making sure Christians, we need to listen well. It's not wise to only have the truth, but not knowing how to communicate it and the experience of the other person, because we'll just start talking over people.
Yeah.
We are placed here for a purpose. And if we really believe that God is relational, we are placed here in a relational purpose that is less about loudspeakers and more about applied truth in people's lives. And that requires a lot of listening, a lot of humility, and a lot of, one of my favorite people, the patron saint of vulnerability, Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown, she talks about whenever she gets into conflicts, she'll start having tunnel vision and she'll start getting a bit sweaty and her heart will palpitate. And her default would either be, cower and tuck her tail between her legs, or put up blocks and start defending and attacking. And she realizes that those two are two incorrect approaches to actually honesty and vulnerability. So she has a mantra in her head whenever she goes into conflicts, which I have a mantra in my head whenever I go into conflicts, is that she repeats to herself, I might not be right, but I'm here to get it right. I might not be right, but I'm here to get it right. And I think as Christians, as we engage with cultures and conflict with cultures and people with completely different sets of values, I think we've got the word of God, we have the truth. But as we enter into these conflicts, our question is we want to get this right. Not to squash people, not to, but to create a relationship where the Spirit of God and the Word of God and the truth of God and Jesus, the Son of God, can dwell. And so it's that posture of listening well before actually even starting to think about these things. Yeah, cool.
Oh, that's so good to end on. Thank you for your time, and thank you for just sharing. Yeah, just I think it's just eye-opening and helping us to kind of consider so many different things that we haven't thought of. So I pray that like people who've been listening will be, I guess, reflecting and thinking deeply, and go to some of those links that we've put down in the description box, particularly the Jesus Club one. Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for your time. See you soon.
Take care.
Bye.